To you, the bold venturers and adventurers, and whoever has embarked with cunning sails upon dreadful seas. To you, who are intoxicated by riddles, who take pleasure in twilight, whose soul is lured with flutes to every treacherous abyss. For you do not desire to feel for a rope with cowardly hand, and where you can guess, you hate to calculate. To you alone do I tell this riddle that I saw, the vision of the most solitary man. Lately, I walked gloomily through a deathly grey twilight, gloomily and sternly with compressed lips. Not only one sun had gone down for me. A path that mounted defiantly through boulders and rubble, a wicked, solitary path that bush or plant no longer cheered, a mountain path crunched under my foot's defiance, striding mute over the mocking clatter of pebbles, trampling the stones that made it slip. Thus my foot with effort forced itself upward, despite the spirit that drew it downward, drew it down towards the abyss. The spirit of gravity, my devil and arch-enemy. Upward, although he sat upon me, half dwarf, half mole, crippled, crippling, pouring lead drops into my ear, leaden thoughts into my brain. "O Zarathustra," he said mockingly, syllable by syllable, "you stone of wisdom, you have thrown yourself high, but every stone that is thrown must fall. O Zarathustra, you stone of wisdom, you projectile, you star destroyer, you have thrown yourself high, but every stone that is thrown must fall. Condemned by yourself and to your own stone throwing, O Zarathustra, far indeed you have thrown your stone, but it will fall back upon you." Thereupon the dwarf fell silent, and he long continued so. But his silence oppressed me, and to be thus in company is truly more lonely than to be alone. I climbed, I dreamed, I thought, but everything oppressed me. I was like a sick man wearied by his sore torment and reawakened from sleep by a worse dream. But there is something in me that I call courage. It has always destroyed every discouragement in me. This courage at last bade me stop and say, "Dwarf, you or I?" For courage is the best destroyer, courage that attacks, for in every attack there is a triumphant shout. Man, however, is the most courageous animal. With his courage he has overcome every animal. With a triumphant shout he has even overcome every pain. Human pain, however, is the deepest pain. Courage also destroys giddiness at abysses. And where does man not stand at an abyss? Is seeing itself not seeing abysses? Courage is the best destroyer. Courage also destroys pity. Pity, however, is the deepest abyss. As deeply as man looks into life, so deeply does he look also into suffering. Courage, however, is the best destroyer. Courage that attacks. It destroys even death, for it says, "Was that life? Well then, once more." But there is a great triumphant shout in such a saying. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. "Stop, dwarf," I said, "I or you, but I am the stronger of us two. You do not know my abysmal thought. That thought you could not endure." Then something occurred which lighted me, for the dwarf jumped from my shoulder, the inquisitive dwarf, and he squatted down upon a stone in front of me. But a gateway stood just where he had halted. "Behold this gateway, dwarf," I went on. "It has two aspects. Two paths come together here. No one has ever reached their end. This long lane behind us, it goes on for an eternity. And that long lane ahead of us, that is another eternity. They are in opposition to one another, these paths. They abut on one another. And it is here at this gateway that they come together. The name of the gateway is written above it. Moment. But if one were to follow them further and ever further and further, do you think, dwarf, that these paths would be in eternal opposition? Everything straight lies, muttered the dwarf disdainfully. All truth is crooked. Time itself is a circle. Spirit of gravity, I said angrily, do not treat this too lightly, or I shall leave you squatting where you are, lame-foot, and I have carried you high. Behold this moment, I went on. From this gateway, moment, a long eternal lane runs back, and eternity lies behind us. Must not all things that can run have already run along this lane? Must not all things that can happen have already happened, been done, run past? And if all things have been here before, what do you think of this moment, dwarf? Must not this gateway, too, have been here before? And are not all things bound fast together in such a way that this moment draws after it all future things, therefore draws itself too? For all things that can run must also run forward along this lane. And this slow spider that creeps along in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you, and this gateway whispering together, whispering of eternal things. Must we not all have been here before? And must we not return and run down that other lane out before us? Down that long, terrible lane? Must we not return eternally? Thus I spoke, and I spoke more and more softly, for I was afraid of my own thoughts and reservations. Then suddenly I heard a dog howling nearby. Had I ever heard a dog howling in that way? My thoughts ran back. Yes, when I was a child, in my most distant childhood. Then I heard a dog howling in that way, and I saw it too, bristling, its head raised, trembling in the stillest midnight, when even dogs believe in ghosts, so that it moved me to pity. For the full moon had just gone over the house, silent as death. It had just stopped still, a round glow, still upon a flat roof, as if upon a forbidden place. That was what had terrified the dog, for dogs believe in thieves and ghosts, and when I heard such howling again, it moved me to pity again. Where had the dwarf gone now, and the gateway, and the spider, and all the whispering? Had I been dreaming? Had I awoken? All at once I was standing between wild cliffs alone, desolate in the most desolate moonlight. But there a man was lying, and there the dog, leaping, bristling, whining. Then it saw me coming, then it howled again, then it cried out. Had I ever heard a dog cry so for help? And truly, I had never seen the like of what I then saw. I saw a young shepherd writhing, choking, convulsed, his face distorted, and a heavy black snake was hanging out his mouth. Had I ever seen so much disgust and pallid horror on a face? Had he, perhaps, been asleep, then the snake had crawled into his throat, and there it had bitten itself fast? My hands tugged and tugged at the snake in vain. They could not tug the snake out of the shepherd's throat. Then a voice cried from me, "Bite, bite! Its head off, bite!" Thus a voice cried from me. My horror, my hate, my disgust, my pity, all my good and evil cried out of me with a single cry. You bold men around me, you venturers, adventurers, and those of you who have embarked with cunning sails upon undiscovered seas, you who take pleasure in riddles, Solve for me the riddle that I saw. Interpret to me the vision of the most solitary man. For it was a vision and a premonition. What did I see in allegory? And who is it that must come one day? Who is the shepherd into whose mouth the snake thus crawled? Who is the man into whose throat all that is heaviest, blackest, will crawl? The shepherd, however, bit as my cry had advised him. He bit with a good bite. He spat far away the snake's head and sprang up. No longer a shepherd, no longer a man, a transformed being, surrounded with light, laughing. Never yet on earth had any man laughed as he laughed. Oh, my brothers, I heard a laughter that was no human laughter. And now a thirst consumes me, a longing that is never stilled. My longing for this laughter consumes me. Oh, how do I endure still to live? And how could I endure to die now? Thus spake Zarathustra.